when we meditate, there's kind of like three different scales, time scales in which it's operating. There's the scale of the moment. There's the scale of weeks and months, even years. And then there's the scale of your entire life. And every time you sit down, all three of those scales, it's like nested dolls. They're all, in a sense, happening. And each of those scales, now when you're a meditation teacher and you sit down and you're teaching someone meditation, in my mind, I have all three of those scales in my head. Some practices you might do and it only has the scale of the moment in mind. It's trying to shift your state, which you can do fairly quickly. Others don't really care what your state is in the moment. They only have the scale of the whole lifetime. I'm kind of interested in all three of those scales. So I'll unpack a little bit what I mean by that. The scale of the moment is the scale of basically being a DJ of consciousness, a mind-body DJ. It's shifting your state, making yourself from being anxious to a little bit more relaxed, making yourself from being totally blown out to being a little bit more focused, changing yourself from being kind of in a bad mood to being in a more loving, in a good mood. These are really important, actually. A lot of what I do at 10% Happier on the app is around doing these little mini meditations that help people who are really struggling with some issue in the moment, who need some medicine, basically a kind of mind-body medicine that can actually shift things for them in the moment. So I'll come back to that. The scale of weeks and months and years is the scale of habit change. This is what most professional senior teachers are interested in. They're interested in the slow change of habits, and it takes a while. It's like mind wanders, you come back. Your mind wanders, you come back. Again and again, you're doing that thing. You're slowly building up this habit of more concentration. This is the scale of making substantive changes in our behaviors, in our responses. And it's what's so exciting to me about practice is you can kind of choose, well, what dimensions of my experience do I want to build up and which ones do I want to bring down? Do me being more focused, more loving, more curious, more affable, more like full of good-natured jackassery. Those are all trainings. There's not a quality or a trait in human nervous system and the mind and body that can't be developed with practice. So this is the scale of changing the gift of who you are, beginning to like make little adjustments to it. And it's like you're kind of souping up the engine on yourself and however you want, because it's the ways in which you want to do that are up to you and your values. This is the place where we learn how to become violinists or artists or musicians. It's the place of practice and that work. And that's a wonderful thing. But then there's a third scale, which is kind of like the most mysterious one. And this is the scale of the whole of your entire life. And this is really where the spiritual dimension of practice comes in. It has to do with, at this deepest level, practice meditation, but not just meditation, certain movement practices, yoga practices, martial arts practices in some ways, prayer practices, all contemplative practices. They're about changing your relationship to the whole of your life, to the phenomenon of life itself, beginning to come into develop sensitivities around the connectedness of things, around the meaningfulness of things. And, this is where there's so much to say about this side of it. This is the part of meditation sometimes that I feel like doesn't get lip service in our hyper-secular world, which is really focused on the first two, particularly around secular presentations of mindfulness. But really, when you're doing a practice, that's the deep level of what's going on. It's showing you openings to your life as a whole and helping you develop more intimacy in that way. And that's the beauty, the poignancy, the mystery, the magic. So I wanted to say a little bit about that because so when we sit right here, all three of those scales are operating. I do try to infuse the practices that I guide with, I kind of point them towards the mystery a little bit, usually in the way that I talk about equanimity and I talk about this, because in all deep contemplative practices, big breakthroughs are almost always preceded by a moment of letting go, a moment of things falling away, of you just sort of like letting go of some struggle, some way in which you're trying to control your experience. You let go of that, and it allowed experience then to meet you coming from the other way. And so that's so I do have that element in the practices I guide. I also always try to bring in the roteness, the good side of the roteness. Like we're doing our workout here. In this case, we're going to work with a meditation called the mountain meditation. So it's really about, this is the scale that practice really happens. It doesn't matter what's going on. If you got lots going on inside, if you don't have a lot going on inside, this is a good day, this is a bad day, still you sit, you take the posture. You're like a mountain. You come back and it's like you're sitting there and it's like the snow falls on the shoulders and it's the fall leaves, or it's the summer heat, and still you sit. Or you're tired or you're hungry or this, and still you sit. You're building up this capacity towards the direction of the whole, which is a direction of happiness independent of conditions. This capacity to be good in all conditions, even if you don't feel good inside, and being okay with that discomfort. So that's really going to be the emphasis of this practice. And that's what meditation teachers say when they say, come back to the cushion. Okay. And, you had this exciting thing happen. Now go back to meditating. You had this really terrible thing happen. Go back to meditating. So I really admire that in teachers and respect that. But there is also finally the scale of the moment. And what the scale of the moment is about is much more about happiness dependent on conditions. It's saying there are certain conditions going on here, and I need to work smart. This is the self-care angle, and figure out what's going to work for me in this moment. And meditation can work really well for being something that can shift you in the moment, from being in a bad mood to a better mood, from being unfocused to more focused, from being blown out to being more grounded. So that definitely can happen. But sometimes meditation doesn't do that. Sometimes meditation, if you're really, really agitated internally and you go to sit down and do, say, a mindfulness practice, it just makes things worse. That can happen. You are your own teacher. You're the one who's got to be tracking that and seeing, do I feel better after this practice or not better? In the long-term thing, we hope that you sit down even when you feel good, even if you don't feel good, and you're slowly marching towards better. You can miss days, you can miss weeks, that's okay. But you're slowly in that march, you resume the habit and you slowly go. But in the scale of the moment, it may be that it requires another practice in the moment. Maybe it requires going for a nature walk. Or if you're like me, you got a lot of energy, I got to go run around the block 20 times or whatever it is. I got too much agitation to sit. Sometimes I can sit and I'm agitated and it cools out. But you got to be the one doing that test, and nobody else can do it for you. Quickly again, I guess it is a bit of a weird concept, just that the effect of meditation is happening on three different scales. It's happening in the moment, potentially to shift your state from being all excitable to more chill, from being super chill to more energy, if that's the direction you want to go. So different practices are going to do different changes in the moment. So it's like that affects the change in the moment. That's the scale of the moment. Then there's a scale of months and years, the scale of behavior change, habit change, becoming in general more a calmer person, more concentrated, more friendly, to name three very well-known trainings. And then there's finally the scale of your entire life, the whole, beginning to appreciate yourself as part of a whole. This is hard to talk about because it's the weird contemplative spiritual thing, or like the trippy mystical thing, but it's not esoteric. This is like philosophers are interested in this, like physicists are interested in this, naturalists are interested in this, anybody who's interested, grandmothers are interested in this. It's the scale of feeling a sense of your whole life around you in some way, whatever that means for you. I'm making it very general here. So that's a little bit about the scales.